Hey, it's Tim and Lisa, and you're listening to the REI Concierge podcast. The REI Concierge helps Americans living abroad find and buy great investment properties in the U.S. From analyzing markets to finding local partners to closing your first deal, we are partnered with you every step of the way. Let's jump into today's episode. Hello, welcome back to our next episode of the REI Concierge podcast with Tim and Lisa. We have another exciting guest today. We're super excited. Tim, I'm going to let you do the formal introduction, but I'm just going to tell our listeners, you have heard of this guest many times throughout our podcast. Lorenzo, if your ears have ever been ringing over the last 6 months, it's because we talk regularly about Tim's flipper friend. So Tim, give us a formal introduction to your flipper friend.
Are you sick of being called the flipper friend yet, Lorenzo?
I'm not sure yet. Let's see how this goes.
All right. We'll see. We'll keep going for a while. So we are privileged to be joined by my friend, Mr. Lorenzo Wooten, my flipper friend to all you folks listening. He has several designations in terms of what he does. He does it all, ladies and gentlemen. He does it all in real estate. So he is a commercial agent. He is a flipper. He started in residential. I've known him over a decade now, which is wild to think about. But when I first met him, he was doing residential and then just got bigger and bigger and took on the commercial world and flipped, and he does it all. So he's got a lot to share with us. I'm excited to learn what he has to say. So Lorenzo, I don't have an official title for you except flipper friend. So why don't you tell us what you actually are and what title you go by? How about that?
I appreciate that. Well, Tim and Lisa, I feel honored to be a part of your podcast and being introduced over the last couple of weeks as the flipper friend. That's new to me. So I've been called many things, but I'll take that one. But I appreciate your audience as well. So as you mentioned, I work as a commercial real estate broker. That's my, let's call it that my 9 to 5. And I've been in real estate really my whole adult life. I started off on the finance end with Fannie Mae. I had this entrepreneurial bug in 2008. And so I left this great government paying job in 2008. So that tells your audience that I'm a little bit crazy if you remember that time frame, the Great Recession.
Yeah.
And I started off as a residential agent with Keller Williams. And as you mentioned, I was close to the time. No, we met a little later than that, probably, Tim, but either way, no, it was around that time. And so I had this, I moved to doing flips at that time as well, shortly after the Great Recession was coming to an end. So it's called around 2011. And then in 2013, I transitioned to commercial only, still with Keller Williams, but no longer doing residential sales. And although I love residential sales, it was great. I was rookie of the year in my county, had a nice team. I just didn't like it. And I know this business has to be something that you have to be passionate about. I love the number side of business and the B2B side of business, and not so much showing residential houses and looking at wallpaper. I transitioned more to the commercial end because of all the reasons I just mentioned. And as you mentioned, since that time, I've been keeping up doing 4 or 5 flips per year, and also keeping up my business as far as brokering commercial deals, mostly on multifamily deals and mixed use in the Washington, D.C. and Maryland corridor. So a little bit of a long intro, but that's me. And then I'm also the flipper friend.
It is. There's so much I want to ask. Usually it's Tim that's jumping in. It's like, I have so many questions. I have so many questions. And I would love, yes, Lorenzo, if you're willing to share, what is it that originally drew you to real estate? I mean, you said you've been in this for your whole adult life. Like, what is it that originally even took you in this direction?
Yeah, I would start off to give credit to my father, and Tim may have heard this story. We used to meet with a networking group for many years, and it started young. And my father was a real estate agent, and he owned a couple small residential properties. So instead of playing basketball, running around on the weekends like the rest of my friends, he had me cutting grass and painting and going to landlord-tenant court or settlements, and I couldn't stand it. I said I would never be a real estate agent. I would never touch real estate, and I'm doing everything he did. So he gave me the vision. So I'll start there, which is crazy, right? And then secondly,
Awesome.
as I became a young adult, reading Rich Dad, Poor Dad, And reading that book, and I heard you talk about that, Tim, on another podcast, and it really resonated with me as like, this is a way to build wealth, to have, making money while I'm sleeping, to leave a legacy for my daughter, and really to create a life that I want for myself and my family. So Rich Dad, Poor Dad really was instrumental to me. And I've been a student and reading other books that I can also recommend to your audience since that time that propelled me here. And I want to propel further. So I haven't stopped growing, but that's how I got started.
That's really cool. I always think it's it's such a gift that parents give their kids when even though you hated it when you were a kid.
That's the whole
you clearly at some, level saw the value, and then, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, it just kind of like takes the message home. And then, as that young adult reading Rich Dad, Poor Dad, you kind of look back at your dad and you're like, oh, that's what he was doing. He wasn't just torturing.
Right. It wasn't just free labor. Right. It was actually his son that he was indirectly teaching. Because he wasn't necessarily, son, this is what I want you to do. It was just go do it. So I learned indirectly, quite honestly, but I still credit him and I'm extremely grateful.
That's awesome.
So Lorenzo, I remember I probably met you in 2011. And honestly, you were influential to me getting involved in real estate. I don't think I ever told you that, but that was back when I was working for my IT company and just kind of, just the definition of a W-2, go do this, you get a little bit, we get a lot, et cetera, et cetera. And I would just watch Lorenzo always looking good in his nice suits and kind of doing his own thing and making his own schedule and hiring assistants when he just got started and like building a team. And I was just like, man, this guy's got something that I want. And it was around that time I first read Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And you and I have never discussed this, but it was kind of like the seed had been planted. And I was like, I like what Lorenzo's doing. And like, I remember just, when you first started flipping, I was like, please send me your spreadsheets. I want to learn these numbers, blah, blah, blah. And you're like, all right, man, I got stuff to do, but here's your spreadsheets. But you were always like super gracious with me, like trying to teach me how you flip and do stuff like that. And then just watching you grow over the years into commercial and just kind of like outgrowing the things you were doing. I was just like, man, so I just wanted to share that with you because you've been influential to me. And I want to talk a little bit about, let's go backwards a little bit to why you left Fannie Mae, if you don't mind. Like, what was that, just chaos in 2008 where you're like, all right, I get it, but I want to be on the other side and I want to do my own thing? Or was it just that entrepreneurial bug where you're just like, I want to kind of run my own show?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I appreciate you sharing the inspiration. You never shared that with me. So
I didn't. I figured I'd do it live on the air. But yeah, you really were, man. Like the more I think about it, the more I look back and I'm like, I was really, I was inspired by Lorenzo in like 2011, when you were first getting started. And I was like, man, I got to do this. I got to do this real estate thing and I got to build my own business. So yeah. There you go.
I know you're trying to get a tear moment for your audience and get me to smile, but I'm not going to let it happen. So, but
come on, man.
I know, right? I don't know, like you guys or maybe others. You taught, go to school, went to Lincoln University, and received my MBA, University of Maryland. Get this great job and ride it out and ride the corporate ladder. And I was on that dream. And if anyone knew me during my college years, it's like, one day I'm going to work at Fannie Mae. And I was able to achieve that goal. And I'm like, great. Then all of a sudden, this entrepreneur bug started hitting. I flipped one property and then one that was the hardest one in my career, the very first one, analysis paralysis. But after that, it became a domino effect. And so I'm purchasing properties during that time. And what resonated with me, I was traveling for Fannie Mae and I was in Chicago. And I was upset in a meeting because I was losing out on an opportunity for a new development deal in Washington, D.C. And I said, oh my goodness. And I was so upset and I wasn't as passionate with Fannie Mae anymore. And to be transparent, I was, going through a divorce and just a lifestyle change for me. And I said, I'm in my 30s right now, mid 30s. And if I don't make this change for entrepreneurship, I probably never will. And I don't want to live a life with regrets. So I had enough money to save that would last me. If I didn't make any money for a year, I would be okay. And I left Fannie Mae. And I started off just flipping. The market changed, as I mentioned, in 2000, around that time frame, that Great Recession. So I said, hey, let me get my real estate license just to sell my properties. But then that transitioned to a career. I didn't necessarily become a real estate agent thinking I was going to make a career out of it just for my own properties with the initial idea. So it really just the passion of my entrepreneurial spirit and realizing that there was a ceiling at Fannie Mae, but there isn't one in owning my own business. And so I followed that dream.
I love that. Yeah, there's so much to, so I said this on one of our last podcasts. I was going to say there's so much to unpack there, but then I told Lisa to not allow me to say that because I hate it when people say there's so much to unpack there. So I don't want to say that, but there's so much to look more into there. So.
Before you look into that, I just want to highlight, I feel like we need to quote you, Lorenzo, because you could take the Fannie Mae and plug in any other organization, but I'm not sure if I'll get it exactly how you said it, but there was a ceiling, you said, at Fannie Mae, and with your own business, there's no ceiling. And I think there's so many different, we could take out Fannie Mae and plug in so many things that there's a ceiling in so many traditional jobs. And for some people, totally fine, like no big deal. It's great. But for others, I resonate with the entrepreneurial bug and like wanting to kind of have more flexibility and freedom. And it takes courage, and yet it also, like, the returns on that risk are limitless.
It is. And I appreciate you saying that, Lisa. And it's like, yes, I had a guaranteed check. I was in my 30s. I was making six figures. It felt great. But it was a sales job, and I would get bonuses based on my volume. And I was probably getting the smallest fraction of what I was overall bringing to Fannie Mae. Yeah. I said, wow, what if I work for myself and I'm able to achieve more, which I was able to do. I've obviously had, like other entrepreneurs, I've had my rough patches during the last, 12 years plus of entrepreneurship. But what I'm getting at is that I work harder now, but sometimes it doesn't feel like work. I could work till 2:00 in the morning, and I'm so passionate about it. I realize this is my legacy. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it's 2:00 in the morning, but it doesn't feel that way. So I do work hard, or harder than when I was at a 9 to 5, but I see the rainbow. So that's what makes it. And then I enjoy what I do too.
That was awesome.
And that makes it, like you said, you can work harder, but if it doesn't feel like work because it's your baby, like this is your business that you built, it's fun, it's work. But like you said, time kind of flies when you're working on something you're passionate about. And that's something that resonates with both Lisa and I know, just kind of starting this company and really loving to teach our clients how to invest in real estate because it's something we're passionate about. Lauren, again, here I go, Lisa. I'm gonna go in a million different directions. You got to rein me in.
Go for it. Lorenzo knows you. I'm not going to try to protect Lorenzo from your million questions.
He's not. Yeah. So this is also something like Lorenzo and I haven't caught up, since I've been back in the States. So I got a lot of questions to ask him, but I'm gonna keep those for later and keep this real estate focused. Okay. So let's go. Let's dive quickly into why you decided were you just sick of wallpaper? Is that the main reason why you went to commercial? Or do you just see like a bigger rainbow there, like more profit margin, more room for growth? Like what I remember when you made that transition, and you and I never really spoke about why you did that, but I remember you kind of just going, I'm going commercial now. So walk us through that real quick.
Yeah, absolutely. I was residential sales, and as I mentioned, I was honored to earn Rookie of the Year, which is a major deal since, the economy was like, the sky is falling, right?
Yeah.
I worked really hard and achieved results. But after 2 or 3 years, I just noticed how time consuming it could be, and the emotional aspect on residential that I didn't necessarily feel was my strength. And I think it's important to always know your strengths and weaknesses, and maybe hire for the gap. So I hired buyer's agents and to cover, the aspect where I wasn't emotionally tied to some of my transactions, because I always want to give good customer service. But the true aspect is during that time, I was flipping properties and I was getting commercial loans on residential properties. Okay. So I was going to a community bank that would give me a commercial loan on a residential flip. And I was starting to learn more about commercial financing and the terminology and cap rates and all that good stuff. And I loved it. I'm really like a math nerd. I was an accounting major, and I've always loved numbers. And my wife laughs at me about all my spreadsheets, but she ends up liking it. So the transition came to seeing these mega transactions and seeing how numbers can lead to building wealth for my clients and even myself. And I followed my passion. And I was introduced to commercial because once again, I was getting commercial financing on residential flips. I saw how I could take that aspect of my personal investments and bring it into my professional life. And I pursued a commercial real estate career.
Can we dig in there a little bit? Because I think that'll be of interest to our clients. So we run into clients a lot that they're hesitant to get into real estate investing because I wouldn't say a lot. Sometimes we have people say, what happens when I run out of my 10 mortgages for investment properties, like before they even bought one, you know? And I say, well, first of all, let's cross that bridge when we get to it. Second of all, there's all kinds of options for financing investment properties. So I know, so like when I do an investment with you, it's under an LLC. You open an LLC under the property's address. And so walk us through, for people that are worried about running out of the 10 Fannie Freddie mortgages that you can get in your personal name, another route is to open an LLC and buy a property in that with a commercial loan, right? So that's kind of what you were doing for your flips, right?
Absolutely. So, I mentioned to you that I've, done sessions like this before in real estate investing, and that ties into getting a team that can advise you on the best strategy. You're applying a model, which is one of my other, top 10 things to do when you're investing. So having a team and part of my team was an attorney that taught me the process of, Lorenzo, have a separate LLC for each real estate property that you own. It protects you from liability. It also allows you to take that shell company, because that's essentially all that it is, and apply for a commercial loan, because commercial lenders do not issue loans, as far as I know, but they do not issue loans in your personal name. It has to be in a business entity. So that awesome advice allowed me to protect myself personally from liability on these investment properties. And it also allowed me to get a commercial loan. I'm still personally guaranteeing it, but that's the process. And so part of the process, the advice I would throw in right there is build your team really before you purchase your first property. Get to know commercial lenders, find real estate attorneys, find other investors. Just as much as possible, your nucleus and property inspectors. So when you do find the property, you can find experts to help you close the deal and do it right. So to answer your question, yes, the LLC is what I attain. I can open, I've probably done 50 in my life. I can start a new shell company in 30 minutes. You do everything online, get a tax ID, and then you submit that paperwork to the lender. You submit it to the bank to open up your business checking account, and then you're up and running. So I know it's a little high level, but it is pretty simple.
No. This is super helpful. And then, so one of my drawbacks, and this is just personal, I wrote a blog about this, is I ended up buying a property under an LLC that I had a mortgage on. So I got commercial financing on that, and it's obviously higher. So some of the drawbacks, I mean, we talked about some of the benefits of getting a commercial loan, is that you're protected from liability. You can get it on as many properties essentially as you want. Some of the drawbacks with that are you are going to pay a little bit higher interest rate. That only really affects you if you're going to buy and hold, which in your case you're not, because you're flipping, but you do have to pay a higher interest rate typically on a commercial loan. And secondly, if you ever want to 1031 that, and again, this is more of on a long-term buy and hold property than it is on what you're working with. But if you wanted to 1031 that, you also have to buy the new property under the LLC. It's kind of harder to deed it back to you as an individual entity. So it's not, you really have to, and I totally agree with what you said. You need a team to advise you, because these are weird little things that not everyone can or should know. I mean, especially if you're just getting started investing. But like, as you continue to formulate your strategy, you really need to talk with everyone on your team about what your intentions and what your goal are to see what makes sense. Because for what you're doing, that makes perfect sense. Getting those commercial loans for each property, and then you bring in investors like myself that seed the money to purchase the property, then you flip it and take out the profits, and give out back the principal and the interest. So I guess this is a long-winded way of saying, know who you're working with, build that team, and get the right advice going into whatever deal you're going to do.
Absolutely. That's exactly right. And then you'll start off mentioning the pros and cons. You're right. With a commercial real estate loan, typically the interest rate is going to be a little higher than a residential loan. But it's really, believe it or not, Tim and Lisa, over the last year, it started to become an even playing field where I have clients getting commercial loans at 3.5% interest rate.
What?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's the lowest I've seen in my career.
Yeah.
So that's one. However, one of the cons, right? We're talking about pros and cons. If I obtain a residential loan, it will be amortized over 30 years, and the term will be 30 years. So there's no balloon payment. It's payments based on the 30-year schedule, and I have 30 years to pay it off. one of the cons of a commercial loan is typically the amortization is only over 25 years. That's one. And typically they have balloon payments that are either at 5 years, 7 years, 10 years, and some best case scenarios of the full 25-year term. But most commercial loans have a balloon payment where you either have to pay off or refinance at the 5-year, 7-year, 10-year term. So investors, once again, assembling your team and getting to know multiple loan officers and knowing all the details to ensure you get the right loan, because that is a major difference with commercial financing over residential.
Yeah, no, that's a great point.
Can you talk a little bit about the balloon payment? Let's just say you have a balloon payment at 5 years, and we can use really straightforward numbers. Say you have a $100,000 loan, you know, you got a balloon payment after 5 years. What does that actually mean? Are you like, you need to bring the balance, and it would be hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? Like, do you need to bring that balance to the bank at 5 years? So can you help actually unpack that? Because I think that's confusing to a lot of people.
Absolutely. So let's just give like a deal story. So a purchase, these terms will really be more relevant for a buy and hold. So most times when I get a commercial loan, I did a project in DC not too long ago, and they provided me an interest-only loan. And so they said, Lorenzo, you need $250,000 to purchase, and we're going to give you $100,000 for the renovation, and you are making up the difference with your down payment. So obviously, if anybody wants spreadsheets, I can give them that for specific numbers. Then it's a 1-year term, and it's interest only during that term, and you have up to 12 months to finish this project. And then I bought, renovated, and resold and paid them off in a year. That means in 12 months, what's going to be, this whole entire loan is being called due. You're going to need to pay us off to the seller of this property or refinance with us or another lender. That's one example of a balloon payment due in a shorter period, 12 months.
Okay.
Another scenario, deal story. Sold a client a 15-unit apartment in Hyattsville. They went to a lender I referred. They had a 7-year term, which means in 7 years is the balloon, and their payment was based on a 25-year amortization. To break it down, like you mentioned, Lisa, in 7 years, they would be required to pay off that loan in its entirety, refinance with that same lender, or have another lender to refinance and pay off that current lender. Commercial lenders, the logic is we're all business owners, most cases, and entrepreneurs that are getting loans with them. And they realize that your business may change a lot during that time. So they want the ability to reevaluate the loan to see if you're high risk, if we need to refinance you into a higher rate based on those circumstances. So that's a little bit of their logic, as far as I know, of why they have shorter term balloon payments versus residential loans that extend out the same time as the amortization.
What percentage of commercial loans actually get called due at 5 years, 7 years, and what percentage, it's no big deal, we just refinance the balance and keep going?
I don't have that information, unfortunately. I've never had a client or a colleague, or investor partner that I know that a lender was like, hey, we're pressing that button, 7-year mark, you need to get out of here, or we're foreclosing. So I haven't had that. Sometimes during the Great Recession, I do remember scenarios specifically with churches. I work with a lot of church sales where they were calling loans due at that time because they had a risk that churches would not be able to maintain their loans because tithes and offering were down during that time. So I've seen that in some rare cases, but I think most times they are working with the owners, and you don't see a lot of foreclosures in commercial real estate because people have to put down such a large down payment. Most people have to put down 20 or 25%, if not more. So if they need to sell the property, more than likely they have equity. You see very few foreclosures in commercial real estate.
So it's safe to say, as long as you're servicing your debt, you're a responsible financial business owner, you're going to be able to refinance at that 5-year or 7-year mark without much difficulty.
That is definitely fair to say.
Yeah.
Cool.
No, I think that's a great point, because I think that the term balloon payment, especially after 2008 and beyond, terrifies people. Like, oh, I have to come up with this massive. Where am I going to get this sack of cash to go drop on the bank's desk? And that's not necessarily the case. Like they just want to make sure it's a checkup, like you said. It's like going to the doctor for a physical. They're like, hey, you've been paying us. Your debt service coverage ratio is okay. It could be a little better, so we're going to keep you at the same rate. Or you've done great. We can knock off a couple. A couple percentage points would be great, but you know what I mean, a little bit off your interest rate, or add a little bit, if you're a little bit, if the numbers don't quite make sense and they feel it's a little more risky, they can raise the interest rate. But even that, worst case scenario, they're not going to ask for all their money back typically. So I think that's a valuable point to make. Lorenzo, I want to go into a little bit. You said you mentioned earlier one of your top 10 tips for investors in real estate, and you've done webinars on that and stuff. And you said one was build a team. Can you we don't have to go like number one is this, number two is that, but give us some pointers for people that are either just getting started or are considering doing it. And then kind of, I guess parlay that into tips for more experienced investors that might just kind of need a leg up or some continuing education for those of us in the real estate world.
Okay, absolutely. I would say, a really good one, without touching on the 10 points and being so structured or school-like, is setting quantifiable goals before you make the acquisition. And so I'll expand on that a little bit. Let's say it's a flip, since I start off as the flipper friend. I have two different type of projects that I can pursue. I can pursue a smaller cosmetic type of renovation where I'm renovating bathrooms, kitchens, what have you, nothing structural. I know from my skill level, my opportunity costs, and the financial investment I'm making is that I do not want to pursue a flip like that unless I'm making at least $35,000. So my quantifiable goal, when I'm looking at this acquisition, my net should be at least $35,000 or higher. So that helps guide you. Mm-hmm. Secondly, is if I'm looking at a new construction, much more time, much more risk, and the time for repayment is longer. My quantifiable goal, I do not want to be into that project for less than a net of $75,000. So I have two investment goals. I've seen investors when they're doing buy and holds, where they say, if I'm buying a 6-unit apartment, I want to make sure I'm achieving an X cap rate. Mm-hmm. And cap rate is, once again, a comparison of net income to value. Or if you want to do something basic and more layman's terms, I want to ensure that I earn at least $200 per unit on this acquisition net. Mm-hmm. So it's like almost reverse engineering. Before you go into this project, you know what you want to get out of it. Mm-hmm. And so what helps me, and I don't know if we ever did this, Tim, maybe a long time ago with the spreadsheets, I will look at a flip. I will say, oh, Lorenzo, I have this great deal for you. It's on Main Street and in Brookland, Northeast DC, you got to get it. Okay, let me do my numbers. I see what the property will be worth after renovation. I want to make sure that I'm not invested for no more than 75 or 80% of the after repair value. So if it's going to be worth $500,000 fully renovated, I want to make sure that I'm not invested for no more than $400,000 into that property. Mm-hmm. That's including acquisition and renovation. So once I say $500,000, I do 80% of that. That's $400,000. I subtract my construction costs. That tells me my maximum purchase value. So that's kind of like a quick high-level way of saying set quantifiable goals, whether you're doing a small flip, a major flip, or if you're doing a buy and hold, to know what you want to get out of the property and then back into it. That way you don't overpay. Because you can get really emotionally involved with your acquisitions and hold. Like, oh, this feels good, and I just know the market's going to change. It's going to be worth 200% more when I get done with this property. Don't do it. Go back to your spreadsheet. Stay logical. Stay to your model. Because I've made mistakes in 2008 and 2009 because it was a wild, wild west in real estate. Yeah. And everyone was, they were giving loans to anyone with a heartbeat. Property values are going up 200% in 6 months. I got away from a model because I'm like, maybe I'm Mr. Conservative and I'm missing a boat, and I was wrong. And so I had some bad investments because I got away from my model. So if I can tell anyone that gets into this that it's risky, business. But if you stick with your model, you do your homework, you can minimize the risk, but try to take the emotions out of it. And having a spreadsheet, having set goals will help you be strict with that and make wise investments.
Lorenzo, how much do you overestimate? I mean, we've all seen the HGTV shows about flipping and everything, and everybody always goes over budget, ridiculously,
Right.
Large amounts. How much do you, do you just try to overestimate renovation costs? And then how about after repair value? Are you trying to be more conservative on that? And so that's a way to minimize the risk, or how much are you kind of like doing that?
Yeah, it's a good question, Lisa. So I'll start off with the renovation costs. So, doing a number of projects, you get to have a good feel of what a project will cost. So what do I mean by that? So if I'm doing new construction, I know that my budget is likely going to be around $150 per square foot. And that's including my 10% contingency fee. So if I'm doing a $200,000 construction, I need to have at least $20,000 built in for my construction cost. And then I match it to my model. Does that make sense at $150 a square foot? So I'm doing some checks and balances. So that's one aspect as far as these are my construction costs. Because if you're really too conservative, you may miss out on opportunities because you're bidding too low. But you want to protect yourself. So that's one aspect. Then I go to the after repair value. So I'm looking at comps and I'm seeing, for example, 5 houses that sold at $500,000, but I see that one house that sold for $600,000. Could I be risky enough and say, nope, my after repair value is $600? Typically, I may do an average and say, maybe not going to be as conservative at $500. I can see how this house received that higher number. Let me go somewhere in the middle.
Okay.
So maybe my after repair value is going to be based off of $550,000 for this particular example. So it is not rocket science, none of this, but it just takes, experience. It takes some research, and that really helps. And, being a licensed agent, I have access to CoStar and MLS, so I can do a little bit better than some investors. I don't have to depend on another person, but, I will make calls to other investors, other appraisers to help validate my value.
Yeah, no, that's great.
There's so many golden nuggets there. I love sticking it. So especially for newer investors, it can be emotional, and is emotional, right? Especially when you're buying your first property. And for folks that we work with, usually from overseas, sight unseen, they say, we get questions like why they painted that color, or, why they use that countertop, and stuff like that. Then this is obviously not in the case of a flip, but in like a turnkey project or an already renovated house. And we try to coach them that you're not living there, like the people that have renovated it. And in your case, if you're renovating in Hyattsville or, Southeast, the market, what people want when they're renting there, or, if people are purchasing as a primary residence, what the market dictates. We don't need to become emotionally attached in terms of this is going to be our house. Like, we need to treat this like a business. And what makes a business is, the income is greater than the outgo, income's greater than expenses. So if you have in your mind, I need $100 a door, I need $200 a door for a buy and hold, or I need to make 30 or 45,000 on this flip, that number needs to stay, right? Like, we can't just say, and there's always going to be another deal. It might not be tomorrow, and it might not even be in 6 months, but if we're in this for the long term, we need to make sure that the numbers are met. Or like you said, you're just going to keep, whittling away at that margin and get yourself underwater. Because, holding costs last longer. You can't find a tenant for a couple months, and there goes your cash flow for the whole year. There's all kinds of things that are built-in contingencies Lisa and I use spreadsheets with our clients to make sure that it matches their expectations. And we build in a lot, 7% vacancy, 5% repair, 5% capex, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a buffer there. But if you really start, well, maybe it's only 2%, or maybe I only need 125. When you start doing that, it gets dangerous, because then you don't want to settle for an investment. You don't want to settle, I guess, is what I'm like. Stick to your numbers, know what they are, and you'll find it. You just got to be patient.
Right. That's so true.
Yeah, no, oh man, there's so much I want to talk to Lorenzo about. He's so wise, Lisa. You see why I want to get into real estate when I watch this guy? And that was in his rookie years. Rookie of the year. So Lisa, do you want to talk more about flips? I kind of want to talk more about flips. I also kind of want to talk more about commercial.
I kind of want to hear some more of what's on Lorenzo's list.
Or more of what's on Lorenzo's list. Let's do that.
All right, let's do that. Let's go to a good one. Let's talk on this now. I expand a little bit more on what you mentioned, Tim, as far as one of my top 10 is evaluate and select the real estate market that you will be investing and do a lot of research. So what helps me with my flipping is I study the market, like on a micro level to say, these are the cities in this county or these submarkets in Washington, D.C. that I want to invest in. How did I come up with those markets, right? Yeah. I think that's important. So I know, let's say for Prince George's County, which is in Maryland, I stayed away from one zip code, 20772. It's Upper Marlboro, nice area, plenty of nice homes, $1 million homes. But what I noticed, the areas that I wanted to flip in, one of my issues is that the time on market for renovated houses was much longer than any other area that I saw that I wanted to invest in. So when I was in a more suburban, less rural area, because the area I'm talking about had a little bit more of a rural appeal, the time on market was much longer. Once again, another risk for an investor because you're looking to get in and get out, right? I stayed away from that. And what I probably learned is that people were maybe a little intimidated by it being rural, or it took that much longer to get to Washington, D.C. And I felt like it was a very smart move. I stayed in markets where I saw that after the property is renovated, most investors had 30 days or less time on market. That helped me out. I looked at what you call velocity. So velocity, kind of learned that term at Marcus Millichap, the firm I am with now, is how many transactions were happening in these submarkets. So if you said, hey, Lorenzo, let's go invest in Clinton, Maryland, a submarket, and I'm only seeing 4 or 5 distressed properties being purchased and, just not a lot of sales. But then I go into Bowie, Maryland, and it's 35 flips. That's probably an area that I want to go into because it's more of an opportunity to purchase. There's more velocity, more transactions. So one of my top 10 is evaluate your markets, select certain markets, and then become an expert. So now it's really helpful that I stay in these areas, DC and Maryland. I have like a good 10 markets I invest in because you know the nuances, you learn the zoning codes, you get to know the players, you get to know officials with the city. If someone said, hey, let's go invest in Virginia, it could be great, but now I have all these challenges. I don't know the zoning codes. I don't have any contacts with the permit office. I can't use my personality and a warm coffee to help get something expedited. But these areas that I've been becoming a master in, I'll use that word, an expert, I have that leverage. So I think it behooves your listening audience and any investor to select markets, study it, become an expert, and try to get your market share there versus this shotgun approach, like, oh, I invest in Boston, or I invest in Virginia, or I invest in DC. Select your market, study, and become an expert. That's one of my top 10.
And I mean, what's really standing out to me is this is super important for the focus that you have of turning properties over versus just, oh, I'm going to buy a house and keep it for the rest of my life.
Right.
For the flipping, for the, turning properties over, you've got to know all those details. I hadn't even thought of 90% of what you just said.
Yeah, it's really interesting to hear this from someone who flips, because like you and I, Lisa, as buy and hold investors, we're not thinking about knowing permitting officials, knowing, DC councilmen and women, and knowing, folks on the board of construction companies in Maryland. These aren't people we need to talk to on a regular basis. But for Lorenzo, that's crucial. And I know, I see you hobnobbing with the governor on the social media. I know you got connections. So, I mean, Lorenzo, he can get things done tomorrow. And it's funny, not funny. It's very interesting to see how different the mindset is of someone who does flips versus a buy and hold. And this is super helpful for us to know that. Because I know, you've been looking for a new project for me to invest in for several months. And it's just, the market's insane. Like you've never seen anything like this. It's crazy around here.
It is crazy.
And luckily we finally found one that's going to work for your numbers, which I appreciate you waiting to make sure it works for everyone. And that's I don't know. That's such solid advice. And no, I appreciate you sharing this insider look with us.
Yeah, definitely.
Give us another one, Lorenzo. We want another one.
All right. I think I'll play off of you again, Tim. I think we're doing a good tag team as well as with you, Lisa. Is tap into your existing network to find passive investors. So, I had a business coach for several years, and he said, Lorenzo, you have a great model, but always continue to solicit and encourage investors. He said, a lot of times it won't be so hard finding projects, but it may be hard to find capital. So, working with Tim, and it's been great. We had a successful investment. We have one ongoing now, and I appreciate you trusting in me. But, I've used investors to make projects work. So I can say, hey, here's a great project. I want all the money to myself. I don't want any investors. And I'm assuming all the risk. And I'll also may be limited to one project at a time. Or I can create a model, going back to the spreadsheet. I can do 2 or 3 different projects, minimize some of my risk, still keep the lights on at home. And I can have a Tim or a John Doe or a Jane Doe, or I have an aunt that's probably invested with me like 6 different projects over the last 5 years. Everyone's making the investment. They don't want to chase after contractors or get up at 7 a.m. to wait at the permit office. They want to see me do that. And now just call them when their check is ready. But it allows me to go into multiple projects, make a little bit more money, and make a little less per project. But as an aggregate, I'm making more. So it goes back into, a lot of times people say the hardest part, like, how do I get into a project? I only have 10,000. You say I need 100,000. You may have one or several investors that say, hey, Lorenzo, I'll invest with you, 10, 15% return on my investment, 6 to 12 month term. Now you have the down payment funds, or you raise enough money to pay for everything with cash. Or you get a bank to finance the acquisition, then you raise all the funds for the financing the construction. So my advice to your audience, if you have struggles with not having enough to make your first investment or continuing investment, is to look at friends or affiliates that will be silent investors with you to help make the deal work, and continuing to build that portfolio, and then you can continue to grow. I see it all the time with my customers that are buying $5 or $6 million buildings, and they've tapped into resources and raised over $1 million. I guess is their version of crowdfunding without having a website.
Yeah.
So it's like a syndication model with those folks, some of them?
Yeah, and some people, absolutely. Yep, it's not officially syndicating because that has a lot of rules with that. But to your point, Tim, they basically are being syndicators and raising funds to make real estate deals work.
Are there rules and regulations around me just asking friends, family, whatever, and collecting money from them? I'm not doing a formal syndication. What are the rules and regulations around that?
I'm not a lawyer, so I give that disclaimer.
Good disclaimer.
I'm not aware of any rules when you're doing it as a private investor. But if you're getting to like a REIT, which is on a high level for most people, or you're doing official syndication, I do believe like the person investing has to have a certain net worth. So, but if you're investing in, $200,000 residential home, and you go to your good friend Tim and say, hey, Tim, I need X amount of dollars. I'm going to give you X amount of return, and we're going to do this in 12 months. I'm not aware of any specific guidelines with that. I would just say, of course, have everything in writing. One book I would highly recommend, probably the one best book I've read on this whole process of raising funds and doing syndication and growing it to a high level. It's called The Best Ever Apartment Syndication Book, and it's by Joe Fairless, Fairless. And it's called The Best Ever Apartment Syndication Book, a 4-part system for raising money and buying apartments.
Cool.
And it's fantastic.
We'll put that in the show notes.
Yeah, it really is an ABC of what we're talking about, and also taking it to a higher level. And so I would recommend that to anyone that's looking to, how do I make a deal work when I do not have all the funds myself? That's the best way I can describe it.
I feel like we need to give a shout out to Wes in this. Wes, when you're listening, just know we're thinking about you, because I know that you are just going to be eating up every single word of Lorenzo sharing.
I was thinking about Wes too. Wes is a client of ours, active military in Africa. But I was going to ask you, I mean, for Wes, I know Wes would be yelling at me if I didn't ask this. If I am looking to raise money and don't have any experience yet, but really want to jump in with less risk, jump in with other folks' money, make it look presentable, like I know what I'm doing and I have a business plan to get them their money back plus returns. Do you have any recommendations for those folks just starting off in terms of like a pitch deck or, a spreadsheet that can present potential investors without a track record of success yet? Like if you're just starting out and you want to do it with partners, with other investors, like do you have a play-by-play for that or, I don't know, some kind of template for success?
Yeah, absolutely. As I mentioned, the first deal is typically always the hardest, right? Because lenders want experience, your investors, even your family member, like, what have you done lately? Tell me something you've done successfully. And if you haven't done anything, it's rough, right? You're just selling it on a trust me, I'm going to get you your money versus having a track record. So what I would say is one of the ways is your first deal can be a partnership. So in 2009, my first property was a buy and hold, a residential home. But my first flip was with a partner that was more experienced. And with that, I didn't make as much, but I did make a profit, but I learned a lot. What it also allowed me to do is now I had at least one example in my portfolio. When my next flip came, I could say, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Lender, look at this one flip that I've done where, in all truth, I probably did only 30% of the work, but I learned a lot. But I was able to present to an investor, a lender, and who else ever wanted to listen to me that I have done at least one project. So what I would encourage someone, if it's available, and I'm sure they are for most people, is to maybe start off with your first one or two deals as a silent partner or a partner where you could learn the pros and cons, learn from mistakes, build your portfolio. That's one way to do it, is to seek a partner that's more experienced.
I think that's super smart. And so essentially on that first one, you put in a good chunk of money. So there's kind of like, real estate investing boils down to deals, knowledge, and money, right? So it's like, if you don't have the knowledge yet, you need the money. So would your advice be for, potential person that wants to not syndicate, but, attract private money, would be to come up with the money first, do a deal with your money and gain knowledge, and then kind of flip that and use that knowledge to get people's money on the second deal to provide them with returns?
Absolutely. Like and so I'll break it down a little further, make sure we're saying the same thing. I've had people like yourself, Tim, they said, hey, I just want to invest, not interested in learning the business. But I also have people like, I want to know everything. So I'll send them spreadsheets. They can meet me on site to meet the contractors. They can see it from beginning to end, including knowing what my profit is. And then it's like, this is great. I do want to do this. So now you've invested as a silent partner, minimize some of your risks. You've learned a lot. And now you've learned how to do the deal yourself. You could pursue that in your select markets and find someone you trust that you can do that same kind of strategy with.
I love it. I think that's super helpful, and I hope Wes heard that. And I think he'll learn a lot from that, because it's intimidating to jump in, right? Like it's always like the chicken or egg type thing. Like, should I go in with the knowledge that I've learned and try to get people's private money to invest in this deal, or should I try to save some capital through other, whether it be W-2 or other investments, put that towards a project, and utilize other people's knowledge on that project as a partner, and then go back and do it myself later. So it's kind of like figuring out the order of things is almost just as important as what you do.
Yeah, definitely. And I heard this on you guys' podcast, and I think this ties into it because this is like one of the top 10. So I'm sneaking them in here.
Yes,
right? Is having a business plan, but learning how to create value with the investment that you're acquiring. Okay. So you have a plan. We did this model. You've done your 75, 80% rule. You understand your return. And now I'm buying this property as a flip. And this also can apply if I'm doing a buy and hold. How do I create value for either one of those type of investments? So you'll probably get a kick out of this. My first project with my wife just occurred, and she was the design coordinator. I did all this design, 3,300 square foot new construction, putting up beams and roofs and sump pumps and foundation. And she handled everything after drywall, including helping with the floor plans. And we have it about to go to settlement next week, knock on wood. Everyone's talking about the light fixtures, the hand knobs, this light package she picked up. I'm like, what about the structural beam? What about the foundation, right? So it's so funny, but as you know, and everyone knows, when you're doing a flip, it's usually like the last 10 to 20% that everyone loves that sells the house. But with me teaching her with this project, one, we had to know, what do people like in this area? How are we creating value, and how are we using our creativity to design a house for this submarket that people like? We couldn't design a house that would look good on the beach because people aren't looking for wood plank on the walls or seashells designs. They're looking for this look in this submarket. So we went over that. She agreed and she ran with it. Of course, we had to stay on the budget because she's like, oh, we should do this $5,000 chandelier. No, we shouldn't, because that's not in the budget and it's not our house. We need this $200 chandelier and it'll be fine, because that's what people have been buying in this neighborhood. So that's one example with some jokes involved, that know your market and know how to create value that you'll get your return on investment. Another one with a buy and hold, which may help, switching gears from a flip, is creating value. I have an apartment for sale in Hyattsville, and it's central heat. The owner pays for $3,000 a year for heating these 4 units, okay? How can you create value? And I took this advice from another investor. He would go in, demolish or get rid of the boiler, and put electric baseboards in each unit and pass on the electric bill, which is already there, tie in the heat to the electric bill, and now he's eliminated his central heat costs. He's automatically created value by $3,000 plus by getting rid of the boiler that was his responsibility, putting individual baseboards in each of the rooms of each of the units, and now the tenant has to pay that. A strategic, or if you want to use creative way of creating value. It can happen with flips and it can happen with buy and holds. So that would be one of my top 10, to have a plan and determine how you can create value or continue to create value for your investment.
Yeah. Man, I love that. That's so smart, because the tenants pay electric. So it's like you take out something that's, $3,000 is that's significant money when you're talking cash flow on a yearly basis for a smaller building. 3
years, you just save $36,000.
Yeah, that's huge. I love that. That's a great little hack right there. Yeah, I'm trying to think if I could do that anywhere. I don't think I can. Not yet. But that's congratulations, by the way. Lorenzo was recently married last year and then just remarried again, renewed his vows like a week ago. He just can't stop marrying his beautiful wife.
I just love her so much. I told my wife, I said, we got to stop celebrating. This is it. But yeah, we had a COVID wedding. I know, in 2020. And so we had big plans, because my wife is half Nigerian and we have a lot of friends and family, and we had to cancel it for obvious reasons. So we didn't want to not get married. So we still had that. And we went with our initial plans just a little over 2.5 weeks ago, had over 350 people that wanted to witness our anniversary / second wedding. So it was beautiful and it was a blessing.
That's awesome, man.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
So I have a question that is going to really change the tone after that beautiful story of you and your wife.
No problem.
Because we're in the month of October, and the Halloween holiday is coming up. People are starting to put up their decorations and whatnot. And I'm wondering, what is your favorite horror story of being a real estate investor, Lorenzo?
Wow, right?
Because we all have them. We all have them. What's your favorite?
Look, if your listening audience could see me, they would know that I had hair on my head before I got into flipping and everything. And now I probably wear my bald head, but this business helped get rid of that quickly. My biggest horror story, I would say it's, I would say probably 2. Is getting away from my model that I had when I first started, and I got so excited and emotionally tied to what was going on before the Great Recession. And my horror story is that I had to sell properties at a loss during that time because I got away from my model and I had to sell the properties. But more recently, the times that I would say is a horror story is managing a project and being over construction budget. So the stress that's involved with, do I cut back this part of the renovation and hurt my after repair value, or do I find more money and hope that I can recoup it when I sell it? So the painful process is underestimating renovation costs. So one of the tips to try to avoid that, what I've learned is, one, learn from your mistakes. I try to take notes of what I did right and what I did wrong after each project so I can get better and sharper. Secondly, even to this day, and even though I have subcontractors I've worked with for over 10 years, I'm constantly seeking new subcontractors, and I'm constantly getting multiple bids, even on my most faithful subcontractors. Because if anyone knows anything, construction is so subjective.
So subjective. I can look at, I had a driveway I had to do at the project that I just gave the example with my wife. I got a quote for $11,000, $8,000, and $4,000 for the exact same driveway. There's not a different driveway, no extra features, no extra bells, no diamonds encrusted driveway. And I was able to get a $4,000 driveway done for $4,000, and it was perfect. But what if I've gotten only just one quote? Yeah.
And of course, you want to look at the workmanship of that contractor, because sometimes you pay for what you get. But in this scenario, I always try to get at least 3 quotes per trade, because I have to keep my subcontractors honest, and I want to make sure I'm not overpaying. At the end of the day, we're all in this to make money. So getting multiple quotes is key. But the most painful experience recently, Lisa, is being over budget. Is very stressful, and it can keep you up at night, and you just want to try to avoid that.
What do you do to get you through those times, Lorenzo? I know a couple of people who are in the midst of a horror story in their own real estate journey. Like, what do you do to get yourself through those times psychologically? Because it all pans out in the long run, but like, it can keep us up at night, right? It can be really miserable in the midst of it. So what are some of your strategies?
Yeah, absolutely. It always helps. So knock on wood, I haven't done a flip where I've lost money. Okay. So it helps that I stay with that model of that 75 to 80% of the after repair, because that's your margin, right? So for repair in front of a rainy day, in case you have some cost changes, or like I just mentioned, you went over budget, at least I've gotten out of this project without losing money, right? And somebody told me, if you're going to be in real estate long enough, you're going to have deals where you've lost money. I don't know too many people that have invested that in anything that haven't lost money at one point in time. So to answer your question, Lisa, is I can look back like I lost a lot of time, but I only broke even. It could have been a lot worse. So psychologically, that helps me. Secondly, I can see where I can learn from that lesson and be that much better and make that much more on the next project. Like, this is what I did wrong here. When I do the next project, I'm gonna do it better, smarter, and I'm gonna make money. I have specific examples when that pain 2 years ago helped me make more money last year, if that makes sense.
That's a great perspective. Yeah.
So, and then, not to beat yourself up. It is a hard business. If it was easy, everyone would do it. HGTV makes it look like it's so easy. Sometimes that TV station frustrates me. Like, bought the house, 2 weeks later, I renovated and we made $300,000. On to the next. Hell no. HGTV drives me crazy. But if it was easy, everyone can do it. But it's a great business. It can be very lucrative. The greatest wealth builder in our world or our country is real estate, but it's not easy. So learning from your lessons, not being too hard on yourself, and looking to learn from your mistakes helps me out psychologically.
That's awesome.
Man, I think all that is golden. HGTV. That's why it's TV, folks. It's not real life. It doesn't happen that way.
Oh my goodness.
I think it's time. Lorenzo, I don't know. I don't know how many episodes you've listened to, but I don't know if you've heard yet a Tim's Selfish Question segment. I have a segment that we do. It's a fan favorite, and I used to do a jingle.
It's time for Tim's Selfish Questions.
All right, my selfish question is so general for you, Lorenzo. I am back in America, and I just want to work with you more. How are you going to teach me all about the world of real estate and all your wisdom as fast as possible? Go.
Oh, wow. How am I going to teach you that? I love an old fashioned. I love a Manhattan drink.
So it's bribery. Bribery is how I learn.
Basically.
Okay. I got to butter him up. I got you.
Yeah,
right.
I love good food. I only work out just to support my eating habit. I'm a foodie. So if you said, Lorenzo, I know a good place that has this, and we're going to have an old fashioned, we could talk real estate until the wee hours of the night because I love talking about this business.
Beautiful. How about a long bike ride?
A long bike ride works.
Right.
We will not be talking on hills.
Okay.
I love the cycle, but you have to focus on hills. It could be brutal. So we'll talk when we get on flat land.
All right, we'll get on the flat. We'll go Haynes Point laps and we'll talk.
I like it. Okay.
All right. Perfect. All right. See, that was an easy one, Lisa. Sometimes they just get off the rails with these 10 selfish questions. But I'm telling you, because Lorenzo, like when he first started getting into flipping, I was like, I want to know everything this guy does. And this is before I really fell in love with real estate. And it's been so cool to watch you go from, starting as a real estate agent to rookie of the year immediately to where you are now has just been awesome and inspiring. So, I'm looking forward to getting back and, working with you however we can now that I'm back in the States. So it's been awesome to have you on, man. It's good to see you.
Lorenzo, thank you so much for your time, for sharing pieces of your story, your advice and wisdom. We really, really appreciate it.
I appreciate you guys as well.
And maybe,
if by chance anybody listening is like, what if I want to be a passive investor with one of Lorenzo's projects? Is there a way for people to find you, website, something like that?
Absolutely. I am a sole proprietor. So the best way you can learn more about me on LinkedIn. So link Lorenzo Wooten Jr. And obviously they could send me an email or give me a call and we can discuss to see if it could be a good partnership from there. So yep, LinkedIn or my contact information.
Okay, we'll put your LinkedIn profile in the show notes.
And I think he's officially, if Lorenzo is gracious enough to bless us again with his presence, I think he is a perfect recurring guest. Lorenzo, we have like a lender that we love having on to give us market updates. I think you might be our official de facto flipper friend, right? Or what do we call it? Flipper guru. You're gonna be our flipper guru.
Flipper guru. That sounds a little bit more, big time. I like that.
It doesn't really roll off the tongue. Flipper guru. We'll figure it out.
GF guru flipper. I don't know. We'll figure it out.
All right. Basically, we'd love to have you back, and we appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, I would love that. That would be cool.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for listening to today's episode of the REI Concierge Podcast. As always, we would be honored if you would share this with a friend and take a moment to leave us a review. And with that, until next time,
happy real estate adventures.